front of me the December edition of Electricity and Control magazine, and with me one of the authors of an article in this particular edition, and the author is Mr. Zahir Juma from eHazard. The article was titled Overview of NFPA 70E 2015. The point being, of course, that this is a document that was updated quite recently. Zahir, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Maybe what you can do is start by sharing with us what it is that you do on a daily basis.
Okay, I represent a company called eHazard, which are electrical safety specialists, and I cover the Africa and Middle East regions. In my daily operations, I spend a lot of time in a steel plant called ArcelorMittal, which is the largest steel plant in the African continent. And that provides a lot of practical experience where you get to deal with the electrical worker, you get to deal with the challenges that they face, and this provides me with the expertise to be able to take my learning from the steel company and apply it to the broader base of the South African electrical worker.
Now, before we dive into some of the issues that you consider to be very important in terms of electrical safety, one of the things that you do, I know, is apart from working in effectively what is a laboratory environment, a large industrial outfit, you also share this knowledge with South African practitioners. Tell us a little bit about that side of your particular career.
Yeah, and one of the most important ways to communicate with a large industrial base, and not just limited to South Africa, but Africa and the Middle East, is obviously writing articles in magazines such as these, continuous professional development. I'm associated with the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers, where we provide coursework, for example, and we update that coursework. There's a lot of research in terms of what's going on in the international market. That means we're looking at what are the Europeans doing, what are the Africans doing, what are the Americans doing, and we bring all of that back to South Africa and we try to integrate it with the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Now, why, and I think it sounds like an almost obvious answer, I imagine, but why is electrical safety so important? One would imagine that everybody's aware that, wow, electricity is dangerous, I need to behave in a certain way. But what we do know in reality is that, of course, many accidents happen. Why, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, one of the greatest risks that we face at the moment is non-electrical workers performing electrical work. And sure, you might have a manager, for example, who's an electrical professional, who is very articulate in terms of the requirements of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and there's a bridge between what a person understands and what the people on the field are doing. And there arises this need to be able to communicate with the person on the floor at grassroots levels. And this, in my opinion, is not being achieved adequately. Still, with that said, you still have a lot of electrical managers, managers of electrical sections who have a government certificate of competency, and because of that are allowed to practice in this environment with themselves not having an electrical background per se. Now what we find is that the belief is that by installing a little sticker with a lightning sign on it, you've created the awareness that here's an electrical hazard. And that sign, the shock sign, is all that it is. It's electrical shock. And electrical shock can be very simply stated that if a person maintains a certain distance and if you use the correct personal protective equipment, you can be protected against this. Electrical arc flash, however, believe it or not, the first white paper which was published on this was by Dr. Ralph Lee in 1982, called The Other Electrical Hazard. Now, 1982 is fairly recent.
Yeah, it's yesterday.
It's yesterday. And in fact, the International Electrotechnical Commission, the IEC Standards Working Group, are only now publishing multiple documents with regards to electrical arc flash safety. So there is a gap.
Yeah, I find that quite remarkable. But of course, this is something that we need to deal with as rapidly as we can. Just to conclude our discussion, the article you wrote, the overview of the NFPA 70E, what are the elements that you'd like to highlight?
Okay, first and foremost, I think a lot of people in South Africa believe that supplying a worker with a flash suit is adequate. It is far from adequate because our Occupational Health and Safety Act requires that a risk assessment be performed. Once a risk assessment be performed, there are certain measures in terms of engineering control which should be provided to firstly mitigate the risk. And if this cannot be achieved, then supply ARC-rated clothing or personal protective equipment as a final and as a last resort. Unfortunately, we in South Africa, bar a few companies, have actually gone about it the other way around. We've provided clothing to people and we believe that this is adequate. So what we did back in 2010, in 2010, we published SAN 724, which addressed the clothing requirement because it was one of the quickest way in which we could ensure safety. However, with regards to electrical arc flash safety, what the ultimate target would be is to basically have a system. And the system starts with, first and foremost, how does one create an electrically safe work condition? Followed by, how does one plan the work such that the risk to the worker is minimized? Thereafter, can you implement engineering controls such as internally arc-proof switchgear, remote switching, followed by maintenance requirements. Maintenance is actually a fairly complicated science, and I think sometimes it's oversimplified. And from maintenance, how does one go about a proper hazard identification and risk assessment? And finally, the last resort would be insulated tools and arc-rated clothing. The NFPA 70E is a standard that's reviewed on a 3-yearly cycle, and that continuously updates the requirements of the steps that I've just mentioned. And this is why it's so important to be familiar with the latest development of the NFPA 70E, because as the field is developing, improving, as we are learning from previous accidents, we are improving the standards. And it is very important to the end user to not only comply to 2012, when a 2015 edition is already available, try and understand what risk promoted the change of that standard, and try and take that home. And that was the point of the article.
Zahir, thank you very much, and I'm sure people are going to get a lot of interest by reading that article. Thank you indeed.
Thank you. Hope so.
Thank you.
Okay.